I do have a question about this as well. Many are asking if Israel was and is still blackmailing Donald Trump.
So recently, Whitney Webb went on the Savvy Sabs podcast to talk about the truth regarding the Epstein and Israel connection, all of Epstein's close relationships to figures associated with or part of the Israeli government, and what the explanations are for Trump's cover-up of this. Is he being blackmailed by Israel? Let's get her take on this. She is the author of the best book in my mind about the Epstein story. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, so I don't think Israel needs to blackmail Donald Trump. Why? Because Donald Trump wouldn't exist as a business or political figure if he hadn't. And the Rothschild family has longstanding ties to the Israeli state, and also to, the popularization of Zionism in the early 20th century and slightly before then. So, he really owes that bank a lot. And Wilbur Ross, who was the banker working for N.M. Rothschild at the time Trump was bailed out, was rewarded by Trump as being his first Secretary of Commerce, even though Wilbur Ross was like, at that point, I mean, he still is geriatric, but he was geriatric at that point too, and was falling asleep in meetings and things like that. And it's not like he was doing a good job, right? So I was widely seen as being a favor for having helped bail Trump out in the early 90s. And it's interesting how Trump sort of got involved in those issues in the first place, because in 1987, I believe, he took a controlling stake in this company called Resorts International that had been linked to organized crime interests, specifically Lansky in the Caribbean. For many, many years, and was allegedly created as some sort of CIA front involving the Dulles brothers, who had organized crime connections also. So he took a controlling stake in that and used it to sort of expand his holdings in Atlantic City, which at the time they were trying to make into the new Vegas, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's connections to Israel are ironclad, and I generally agree with her. She's going into some of kind of his financial connections, but certainly it doesn't seem like Israel would definitely have to blackmail Trump. He's been a willing participant in carrying out the Israel First mantra, even since his first administration, when he moved, the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He signed the Abraham Accords. He ramped up the war in Syria. All these things. He shredded the JCPOA. All these things benefited the Israelis' government's position on these issues. And if he's being blackmailed, it certainly wasn't any time recently that happened, because this stretches as far back as 2016 in his campaign pledges, and then when he became president in 2017. So I generally agree with her on that, but there's no, getting around the fact that Epstein's close connections to Israel are such that issue is being completely ignored.
And so, and then that same year, he buys like Adnan Khashoggi's yacht, which Adnan Khashoggi had previously used for sexual blackmail, as I note in my book. And then he starts popping up on, or Trump does, on Robert Maxwell's yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, taking pictures with Maxwell, a senator for the late former Senator John Tower, who was Robert Maxwell's main accomplice in his aspect of the Promise software scandal. And then Steve Ross, who I think was CEO of Time Warner at the time. And Ross basically started his company that later took over Warner Brothers, using an organized crime run company. And so there's just a lot of, obviously a cesspool of this world. And it really shouldn't be surprising that Trump would inhabit these kind of social circles, because his mentor was a man named Roy Cohn, and Roy Cohn was involved in, sexual blackmail activities at the Plaza Hotel, which Trump later bought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these connections stretch far and wide. And if you're not familiar, Adnan Khashoggi was a figure related to the Iran-Contra scandal. He was kind of the stereotype type of a rich Arabian kind of playboy. He had a harem that followed him, and he had, just immense amounts of wealth. Trump later bought his yacht. She also talked about Roy Cohn, that was Trump's mentor. And just all these connections to Israel are unavoidable if you dive into this closely. On the surface level news stories related to the Epstein case, you won't hear a lot of this stuff, but her book reveals all this in depth. And it's hard to follow if you listen, because she's dropping these bombshells one after the other, but it all fits into the context of both Trump and Epstein's connections to Israel, which are very close, and which are very close with the intelligence aspects of Israel.
And then later, had teamed up with elite model management of Casablancas to host Look of the Year there for a few years. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, a lot of pieces to keep track of here, but basically he's in this Robert Maxwell world. And sorry, I was talking about Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn not only was involved in sort of those, sexual blackmail networks, he was also pretty much it's very easy to document, a bridge between organized crime and political power in the US. He was involved in the Nixon administration. He was involved in the Reagan administration, while also serving serving as lawyers for top mob bosses, basically.
A lot of
and
it
also
goes
being
back-
Donald Trump's lawyer and lawyer for like Studio 54 and some of these, shadier nightclubs, which is actually supposedly where Trump met Casablancas of elite models. So
Yeah, Jean-Luc Brunel's cover story for, his madness, his crimes, his sexual deviations from reality were part of this scheme to create a modeling agency. That's how he went down this road. It's the perfect cover for sex crimes and sex trafficking that both Epstein and Brunel were involved in too.
A lot of it just goes back to corruption. A lot of money and corruption, it seems
money
like.
and power in New York City it obviously involves corruption, I think. If you look at it over the decades, no question there. You have to be part of a club to get in to politics there, for sure.
Yeah, that's the Uniparty. They all cover for each other despite all the theatrics that they're clashing with each other. Remember, lock her up, that Trump said, it's just so absurd. And, that's where we're at here. It's that you can't reveal the truth, even if it's damaging to the other party at times, because guess what? Your side's implicated too. And I think that's what we're seeing in the Epstein cover up and the Epstein story.
And the upper echelons of power. It's, you have to be part of the modern mob, basically.
Wow. This is why I look at all the wealthy people with the side eye. Like, how did you get there? And speaking of wealthy people, this is in the news recently. Of course, Donald Trump has decided to take over DC, and he is saying that crime is the issue. The numbers don't show that. DC crime has actually gone down. But what was brought to my attention is this idea that Donald Trump agrees with, which is called freedom cities, which is also something that is pushed by Peter Thiel, apparently, where going back to the old days where we had company towns, where it's like, it seems like corporate takeover of these
the modern
towns.
version of that with programmable stable coins. Yeah, that's pretty much where they're trying to take things. But I am not an expert on the freedom cities. I would encourage you to interview Ian Davis, who basically covers that beat for my site Unlimited Hangout, and is having an upcoming piece on freedom cities, and has written about some of this other stuff in a series he did all about the Tealverse, and their vision for what the government corp technique, the GovCorp technate model, which is basically privatized government, but you're privatizing the state, but you're not necessarily you're not removing the authoritarian capacity of the state.
Yeah, it's the combination of state and corporate power to expand the surveillance apparatus, and this idea of freedom cities is based upon the notion that if you make people more congested in a closer area, it's easier to spy on them, get information on them, and blackmail them. Whitney talks a lot about in her book the fact that in the future, there won't need to be a Jeffrey Epstein to be out there to carry on these blackmail operations. You'll just be able to, via the Palantir surveillance state, where, you can record people and seize information off their devices or plant it onto their devices, because there's no need for direct human contact contact to get this blackmail information. But I really enjoyed this podcast. Thanks, Sabby Sabs, for having her on here. We talked a little bit about Epstein's Israel connections and other videos too, but it wasn't just Robert Maxwell. It wasn't just Ari Ben Menashe. It wasn't just Ehud Barak. It was people like she talked about here, Adnan Khashoggi and Douglas Leese, that he had close connections with in the 80s, running money laundering operations as a part of arms trafficking deals like Iran-Contra that Adnan Khashoggi was a participant in. That Robert Maxwell likely played a big role in. And these people roll in the same circles, and we're just supposed to believe that there's nothing there, that there's no intelligence connections, no blackmail, no clients whatsoever. Well, just a cursory examination of the proof and the content and the documents we know about tells a different tale. And Whitney has been part of telling that tale for many years. I really appreciate Whitney and the research she's poured into this case. Again, her book, One Nation Under Blackmail, is phenomenal. It's the #1 book I recommend on the Epstein case. It's how I learned much of what I know about Epstein. But these connections are just unavoidable, and it's the thing that never creeps into mainstream stories about Epstein. You hear, rightly so, a lot about his sex crimes and the salacious aspects, but you hear compartmentalization and, a propensity to build this into partisan boxes. Is Trump implicated in crimes? Is Clinton implicated in crimes? Well, the most plausible thing is that they're all implicated in crimes. This is the uniparty. And despite all the theatrics of modern elections, they all are part of the same global elite, the same ruling class. They often cover for one another, despite what we're led to believe that, Clinton and Trump are at such odds with each other. Well, they were at each other's weddings. It's so preposterous that this is just swallowed wholesale, but that's what we're going to get. We're going to be skeptical about this story forever as long as the answers don't come out. And it's the way in which Trump has handled this, not just evasively, but defensively, and then throwing his own supporters under the bus if you still want answers on this, and then calling it a Democratic hoax, that has only raised new questions, and it will continue to raise new questions. I think this story is the JFK assassination story of our generation. It will linger on. There will always be questions about it, and it's likely to hurt the Republicans in the midterms if you care about that sort of thing. I don't think the composition of our government seems to indicate any kind of changes in policy, as long as the military-industrial complex and the Israel lobby and the banks and big pharma exist and remain, because those lobbies don't go away no matter who you vote for. No matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain. Let's just be real about that. That's an adage from my good friend Tom Woods. But I do want to hear from you down below. Is Whitney Webb right about this? How extensive are Epstein's connections to Israel? Why is it ignored by almost everyone? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Sabrina Salvati. Really appreciated her interview here. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, and in return I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live on my channel. Those are the members only videos. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.